Good morning, I'm Craig Negrelli. It's Thursday, November 14th, 2024, and these are your Unbiased Updates. President-elect Trump continues to make his picks for his cabinet. His most controversial move yet? Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. Why it might be an uphill battle for the controversial Florida congressman to get confirmed. And clean sweep. This morning, we now know that Republicans won control of the House of Representatives in the election, and who GOP lawmakers voted to lead them in the next term.
From the Straight Arrow News Studio, bringing the stories that matter to you from across the United States and around the world, these are today's Unbiased Updates.
This morning, President-elect Donald Trump continues building out his second administration. After meeting with President Joe Biden at the White House on Wednesday morning, Trump selected more names for key positions, including nominating Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, a choice being met with opposition from some Senate Republicans who would need to confirm the pick. Gaetz resigning from the House of Representatives just hours after the nomination came out. House Speaker Mike Johnson making that announcement during a press conference.
I think out of deference to us, he issued his resignation letter effective immediately of Congress. That caught us by surprise a little bit, but I asked him what the reasoning was, and he said, well, you can't have too many absences. So under Florida state law, there's about an 8-week period to select and fill a vacant seat.
Johnson saying the resignation started the clock on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis calling a special session to fill the vacancy, which will narrow Republicans' slight majority in the House. In making his nomination, Donald Trump called Gaetz a, quote, deeply gifted and tenacious attorney who has distinguished himself in Congress through his focus on achieving desperately needed reform at the Department of Justice. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate, Gaetz would be in charge of the same department that investigated him for years over sex trafficking allegations. Gaetz denied any wrongdoing, and the DOJ last year ultimately decided not to press charges. In addition, a bipartisan House Ethics Committee was in the final stages of its own investigation into Gaetz. Gaetz told the committee in September he was done cooperating with its investigation. However, Gaetz's resignation would put an end to that investigation, as the Ethics Committee does not have jurisdiction over former House members. Trump's announcement came during the House Republicans' closed-door leadership election, with lawmakers telling several news outlets that, quote, there were audible gasps in the room when they heard the pick. In response to Gaetz's nomination, multiple senators are on the record not throwing their full support behind the decision, with one telling Fox News that Gaetz, quote, will never be confirmed, and another saying, quote, ain't gonna happen. Gaetz's office has not responded to the criticism. Matt Gaetz himself issuing a statement on social media in response to the nod from the president-elect, saying, quote, it will be an honor to serve as President Trump's Attorney General. The landscape of Congress in the new year became clearer on Wednesday, with Republicans winning enough seats to control the House. Victories in Arizona and California gave the GOP the 218 seats needed to make up the majority in the chamber. Republicans will now have control of the House and the Senate when President-elect Donald Trump takes office. GOP lawmakers voted on leadership in both chambers on Wednesday, with House Speaker Mike Johnson winning the nomination to remain on the job for another 2 years. A full House vote will take place in January. Johnson says Republicans have a mandate to deliver an America First agenda. Majority Leader Steve Scalise and GOP Whip Tom Emmer also retained their leadership roles. Over in the Senate, Republicans elected John Thune of South Dakota as the next majority leader. The 4-term senator will replace longtime leader Mitch McConnell. While Republicans have won enough seats to take control of Congress, Pennsylvania's U.S. Senate race is headed for a recount, as Democratic incumbent Bob Casey has refused to concede to his Republican rival, Dave McCormick, despite the race being called by the Associated Press. While provisional and mail-in ballots are still being counted, unofficial results show the race within the 0.5% margin, which automatically triggers a recount under state law. Currently, McCormick leads Casey by less than 30,000 votes. Despite Casey refusing to concede, McCormick was on Capitol Hill yesterday for freshman orientation, where he and other new lawmakers met with outgoing Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. In Brazil, security concerns are heightened this morning after an explosion outside the country's Supreme Court less than a week before the G20 leaders are set to meet in Rio de Janeiro. Brazil's Supreme Court is located in the nation's capital, Brasilia, about 700 miles northwest of Rio. Authorities say a man killed himself while detonating explosives in Three Powers Plaza, home to all three branches of Brazil's government, after unsuccessfully trying to get into the Supreme Court with the explosives. The vice governor of the country's federal district said the suspect blew up a car near Congress before heading to the Supreme Court. Police have not identified the attacker, but they believe he was working alone. A prolific teenage serial swatter from California has pleaded guilty to making hundreds of hoax calls about mass shootings and bomb threats to schools, religious institutions, and government officials nationwide. The Department of Justice says 18-year-old Alan Filion pleaded guilty yesterday to 4 counts of making interstate threats. He faces up to 20 years in prison, as each charge carries a 5-year maximum sentence. Officials say from August of 2022 to January of this year, Filion made more than 375 swatting and threat calls in various parts of the country, including Maryland, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Washington, and Texas. Swatting is when somebody makes false accusations to send a large number of law enforcement rushing to a location where there is essentially nothing going on. Prosecutors say Filion formed a business out of serial swatting, advertising his services on social media for a fee. Finally this morning, with just weeks to go in his term, President Joe Biden is about to make history in the coming days. While in Brazil this weekend ahead of the G20 summit, he will become the first ever sitting president to visit the Amazon rainforest. President Biden will meet with local, indigenous, and other leaders who are working to preserve the region as it faces deforestation. In July, the Biden administration put $47 million toward the Amazon Fund as part of the $500 million the president committed to fight deforestation. The president kicks off his trip to South America today by visiting Peru for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. Those are your unbiased updates for this Thursday. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Friday. For all of us here at Straight Arrow News, I'm Craig DeGrelli. Have a great day.